Time travel!
It's honestly fascinating how time travel is a concept that no one can be knowledgeable about, since technically it doesn't exist, and every time you try to figure its logic out, you feel like your brain is trying to escape from your head. But also, some of the most entertaining and best movies of all time deal with that concept. Using time travel in movies is like a cheat code. It kind of forces you to turn your brain off, not ask questions about it, and enjoy the ride. Or if you're Christopher Nolan, you, I guess, somehow have your viewer doing both. Nolan's name has been getting up there with Tarantino and Fincher as a director that typically college film bros praise, and it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, but also, I'm a simple man. If y'all can remember, I reviewed The Dark Knight trilogy, about 3 years ago. Oh my dear lord. He's been directing for more than 2 decades, and yet he's only missed once. And it was still pretty decent. Now we get to Tenet, the third film in Nolan's Fuck Time and Physics trilogy. It's a series that he seems to add to at the start of every decade. 2000 had Memento, which was honestly way more confusing than Tenet, but was still pretty great regardless. Then in 2010 we got Inception, which is my personal favorite movie from him, and not to sound like that guy, but it's one of those movies where a lot of people say it's confusing, but it's really not. Literally, just don't be on your phone and pay attention and you'll be square. I was really looking forward to Tenet when it was first announced, mainly because of how mysterious everything around it was. Plus, when I noticed the timing of the release, almost exactly on the 10-year anniversary of Inception, and heard rumors of it being a spiritual successor to that film, I got super hyped. Then, John David Washington was cast in the lead, making this the first Nolan movie to have a black lead. And all I could say about that was about time. I'm sorry, I'll delete my channel right now. Then there was the teaser that was shown before Hobbs and Shaw screenings that caught my attention, especially with that unnerving score ramping up in the background. Then I go home and that's when I find out that the score is gonna be done by fucking Ludwig Göransson. Bro, it's a wrap, okay? It's a wrap. I'ma be there. Opening day, no matter what. Nothing's gonna stop me, okay? Not even a... While every other big tentpole movie was being either pushed back further and further or getting pushed to streaming services, Tenet still stood firmly on its July release date until COVID cases started to spike as July approached, and it ultimately got pushed twice, and was eventually released at the start of September. After losing the studio hundreds of thousands of dollars already in marketing, the movie released to a somewhat polarizing reception. And after seeing this film twice in theaters and then a few more times on Blu-ray and HBO Max, I just have one thing to say. I honestly think that releasing this film in theaters was the worst possible move that they could have made. For one, after seeing how well something like Godzilla vs. Kong did despite it getting released in both theaters and on HBO Max, that same release format definitely could have worked for Tenet, especially considering the names attached to it. Then there's the other reason as to why, and it's a universally discussed issue with this movie. The goddamn sound mixing.
Our logistics department ships to and from any other free port in the world without customs inspection.
You know, for a $200 million movie that had a real aggressive marketing campaign basically begging audiences to watch it in theaters, you'd think that they'd make sure the sound mixing wasn't total dog shit. I mean, it does help casual audiences learn what good and bad sound mixing is. Only thing is that people had to pay like $10 to see it and risk getting a deadly virus. What's even crazier, and this could be my mind playing tricks on me, but when I saw it on HBO Max, the sound mixing improved ever so slightly. Plus, that experience had the benefit of turning on subtitles, so it actually became one of the best ways to view this film, along with viewing it on Blu-ray. Now, as some people might point out, Nolan's last few movies, especially Dunkirk in my opinion, also had some pretty doo-doo sound mixing. However, I feel like Dunkirk is also a pretty straightforward movie despite the unconventional storytelling. Plus, it felt a lot more intentional as there was a heavier emphasis on visual storytelling in there than Tenet, which gave off that typical Nolan complex blockbuster feel. Crazy thing is that in an IndieWire article, Nolan goes on to defend the wonky sound mixing in his movies, specifically Interstellar, saying that it gives a quote-unquote wonderful feeling of scale. I mean, technically there's nothing bad about that, and I can respect experimentation with sound, but as we've seen with films like Inception, Memento, and Interstellar, they're stories with lots of moving parts and complex ideas. Tenet is no exception, and with Nolan's usual exposition-heavy dialogue, you can imagine how frustrating it is when the dialogue explaining this really elaborate premise is buried under or at the same level as the score, the ocean, or other sound effects. Sometimes the spectacle does have to take a back seat in order to know what the fuck is going on. As an example, there's a pivotal scene later in the movie where we see how Sator, our villain for the night, truly uses the power of inversion, making for a fantastically cool idea, but a scene where they decided to record the dialogue underwater and mix it under the Foley. Then there were other moments where I played the first minute of the movie on a soundbar and it was so loud that I thought I blew out the speaker. That was scary, considering that it was not mine. With all that said, you're probably thinking that I really didn't like this movie, to which I can say, y'all, I'm a simple dude. Like, I see a movie that has a fight scene with two people where both are technically fighting themselves in reverse. I'm sorry, I gotta love it.
Okay, it's time for one of our favorite games on the show called What If It Was Purple? Up first we have, let's see it purple. Oh, come on.
So it's not my favorite Nolan movie, but I really loved Tenet. For as much as the sound mixing can get some shit, everything else is on point, including the editing, which I'll speak more on a bit later. John David Washington as the protagonist was a real delight to witness. A lot of the hand-to-hand sequences he was involved in, especially the little kitchen fight, really made me want to see him in more action, especially like a James Bond-esque movie. I mean, I know that's a tall order considering MGM acts like Idris Elba isn't right there, but I don't really fucking care. I mean, it also helps that they gave this man some of the best lines in the entire movie.
Just tell me if you've slept with my wife yet. No. Not yet.
Including my personal favorite line, which was also in the promos, and drew me into this premise even further.
What the hell happened here?
It hasn't happened yet.
There's something about that line that's so perfect, from the way it's delivered to the mystique behind a phrase like that, to it just being like the coolest way to address time travel. Again, I'm a simple man, like I've been telling y'all this for years. Robert Pattinson as Neil is also fun to watch, and the two of them have odd yet really amusing chemistry. Again, Nolan has that weird dialogue I mentioned earlier, but when it comes to the banter between these two, it's always fun. Elizabeth Debicki is great and also ridiculously tall. In this movie, her son is to her what Chance the Rapper's wife is to him. For whatever reason, the movie has her hell-bent on reminding the audience how important her son is, to the point where it can get irritating, but mostly funny.
Thought if there was love there, it might give me my son back. Every day my son spends with that monster, he thinks a little less of me. Whatever it takes to get what you want. Not a second's thought for me or my son.
Everyone and everything that's ever lived, destroyed instantly. Says enough?
Including my son.
Yes, that's what everybody means. Like, y'all, in the movie where you guys take an entirely different approach to the concept of time travel, I can assure you, this whole mother-son thing, that's not something we need to elaborate on, I promise you. Then we have Sator in the movie, who is just hilarious. Again, he's played well by Kenneth Branagh, but like, he's one Adidas tracksuit and a pet bear away from getting those Russian stereotype stones. What's weird is that his character actually isn't bad at all. I found that he really does work well for a villain, and his obsession with controlling everything from his heart rate to the laws of space, time, and physics is really fascinating. Branagh is cranking the energy up to 12 here, but like, seeing this pudgy dude intensely comparing himself to a tiger is just funny as hell.
You don't negotiate with a tiger, you admire a tiger until it turns on you and you feel its true fucking nature!
2020 was a weak year for comedy, not counting those insane videos of anti-maskers, but Tenet was picking up the slack. I gotta respect that. This shot right here especially had me dying every time I rewatched it. That draw me like one of your Russian oligarchs type beat. As usual with a lot of Nolan films, it has that sleek direction and cinematography that dances a fine line between pretentiousness and polish and leans, thankfully, a lot more into the latter. There's also a weird level of suffocation and anxiety I felt when watching anything that had to do with the inverted world. The way that they tackled how it works is fascinating, and I do have to applaud it for the way it incorporates it, with everything from physics to oxygen and CO2 distribution being completely switched around. Seeing that moment for the first time was oddly unsettling, knowing that if he slips up even once, he could possibly rip apart or die from lack of oxygen. I think it's because like that last thing is something you'd expect to see more so when the character is in like an underwater or a space setting, but I guess it's just seeing it in like a normal populated urban setting on Earth that's just so bizarre. I will say that this will probably be the best blockbuster out there that encouraged wearing a mask for your safety. One thing I do want to point out is that the film is cropped entirely in letterboxd format on HBO Max, meanwhile the Blu-ray maintains that changing aspect ratio. I plan to talk more about this in other reviews, but with films like these, I feel like it's kind of important to maintain those aspect ratio changes, especially when it comes to giant set pieces. Like, that's just something that irritates me. It's not a problem with the movie, obviously, it's more a thing with HBO Max and other streaming services. Like I said, I'll get into that with more reviews. Like for me, it's up there with smoothing a film's frame rate. Not as vile, but like just as distracting, especially if you've seen the original cut already. Speaking of distractions, one thing that oddly isn't is the editing. It's nothing groundbreaking or whatever, but it's pretty competent and well done, and helps feed a theory of mine that was kind of inspired by a tweet I saw. Now for posterity's sake, I'm gonna say that I wrote this part of the video before I read the rest of this guy's thread, but basically, could Tenet be a dream that the protagonist is having? I mean, when we first see the protagonist, it's almost like he's sleeping, and it throws us right into the action with no context. As with literally every dream, the common denominator is that we never remember how they start, as they said in Inception.
You never really remember the beginning of a dream, do you? You always wind up right in the middle of what's going on.
The opening scene with everyone in the opera house passed out while a shootout happens has such a, like, elegaic feel to it, like with the inverted car chase I mentioned before. Plus there's how certain characters feel almost planted and artificial. I mean, there's a character in here whose name is just literally protagonist. You never know what his name was beforehand. And then the movie kinda just ends at a part where you weren't expecting it to end, but at the same time, you don't know what else could have happened there. Now, after reading this, I did read the thread that I saw from Matt Zoller's sites, and he brings up certain things that I brought up, with the movie coming off as something Nolan ripped out of his subconscious/dreams, and brings up something that I wish I did just now, a possible meta-narrative involving the protagonist, especially seeing how he quips and reacts to threats as seen in previous clips.
I ordered my hot sauce an hour ago.
Which always has like a sense of self-awareness to it. And then there's the fact that he's like the only black dude in the entire movie, which brought up comparisons between him and the character from Blazing Saddles. I know, the last movie you were thinking about, who kind of has the same character type as the protagonist based on these two criteria. And then there's the fact that the statement was so bewildering to me that I went back to the movie and skimmed it to see if there was any other black person that had a speaking role, and found literally no one else. He's legit the only black person in the universe. This movie feels like what happened when Christopher Nolan fell asleep while watching Blazing Saddles on his TV, and like this movie just was happening in his dream. Unrelated, but can you tell that I wrote this part at 2 in the morning on like 6 hours of sleep? Anyway, I'm gonna switch because I have a feeling that this looks bad. Yeah, I don't really have a smooth transition here. I just want to get into the sexy ass score now.
Yo, yo, yo! Ah!
I think it's safe to say that he might just be one of the best composers and producers working right now. Imagine producing Because the Internet, Awaken My Love, This Is America, and the scores for Creed and Black Panther, all in the same decade. Sure enough, not only is it excellent, it is the best thing about this movie. I've seen the movie 4 times, but I've played Posterity, the centerpiece track in my opinion, God knows how many times. And just the fact that this man played with inversion in the actual score as well, making the track sound reversed, and it adds a whole different vibe to it when you actually play it in reverse. Can you fault me for thinking this movie is a little bit cool? And good gravy, we haven't even gotten into the song yet. It's decent. I'll probably never listen to it again, but it's not without its merit. Granson, as usual, still comes through with the production, and even though I never have a goddamn clue what Travis is talking about on his songs, I support his energy. I will say it is really bizarre to hear Skirt Skirt at any point in a Nolan movie, but I enjoyed it. I'll allow it. Still way better than hearing another one during the credits for A Wrinkle in Time. Yeah, I'm never letting Disney live that down, by the way. What the fuck was that? Am I the only one to remember A Wrinkle in Time? Because I don't see people talking about it anymore. I really hope that I'm not. I hope not. It's like, then I'm talking to... Anyway, wasn't this about Tenet? Yeah. The film rocks. I don't have to elaborate more on that, okay? Like, we live in an age... Okay, we live in a twilight...
We live in a twilight world.
Or something like that exists, or something like the prequels exist, and you can say those movies are good, and still be taken seriously. I don't have to elaborate more on why I just enjoy Tenet. Like, it's just a fun-ass movie. I like seeing cool people do cool shit. Am I getting defensive because, you know, I like this one? Even though people are making fun of it? Maybe. I don't know. That's the end of the review. Have a great day. Night. It's 12:30. Have a great night.
Okay. There comes a time